special guests. Mayor Kors and City Manager Reddy are joining us today, and we are so thrilled to have them here. But before bringing up our guest speakers, I would first like to go over the format of this seminar. We will reserve the first hour or so for a discussion until approximately 4:30, followed by about 30 minutes of Q&A. So please hold your questions until then and go ahead and type them up in the Q&A chat box if you have any. Now on to the background information on our guests. We have Mayor of Palm Springs, Geoff Kors, with us. Hello. And he has led a very successful career in law, legislation, and government service before being elected to the Palm Springs City Council in 2015. Mayor Kors has been a leader on issues including public safety, ethics and transparency, economic development, homelessness, and so much more. I can't read them all off. And Mayor Kors is a graduate of Stanford Law School. In a successful professional career, Mayor Kors has worked as Assistant Regional Counsel for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, as a civil rights attorney in private practice, and as the Executive Director of Equality California. We also have David Reddy joining us today. He has been the City Manager of Palm Springs since 2000. When I was born. So since coming to Palm Springs nearly 20 years ago, his main responsibility is the day-to-day operations of city government, including managing a total budget of $270 million and 475 employees. City Manager Reddy holds a master's degree in urban studies, as well as a PhD in political science, public administration, and is an attorney. He teaches various public administration courses at Cal State San Bernardino and serves on the university's Master of Public Administration Advisory Board, among many, many other accolades. Once again, we don't have time to get into, but we are so delighted to have them both here today. So thank you so much for joining us. We are so thrilled. And if everyone is ready, I will go ahead and begin with the discussion. So today, I have a ton of questions regarding Palm Springs and COVID-19. It seems like every day we are learning so much more, and there are new updates, especially on the local level. So I guess just to begin, can you tell us about the journey from mid-March to today, when America first began responding to various, state level policies? And did you believe it would get this bad when you first heard about COVID?
Mayor, go ahead. I think that was a great one for you to start.
Yeah, okay, I'll start. You had a sense it could get bad, but I was more optimistic that as a country, with the notice we had of what had happened in China and other places, that we would be better prepared than it turns out that we were as a nation to deal with this. For the city of Palm Springs, as we started seeing cases in California and some recommendations from the governor's office, and a few counties in the San Francisco Bay Area start to take some measures, I actually came in and met with David to talk about what we need to do. Riverside County was not taking any measures, yet we knew that our residents have a large component that are vulnerable. 40% of our residents are 60 and over, and we know here in the Valley, we have higher rates of asthma, pulmonary disease, heart disease, diabetes, and HIV. So realizing that 50% of our population was in the most vulnerable group to get very sick and potentially die from this, we decided we needed to act faster. So we first started acting probably 5 days before the state with closing down bars and limiting seating in restaurants and some other measures. And as it moved forward, a couple days before the governor acted, we issued our stay-at-home order and closed non-essential businesses. We did urge that to happen at the county level. The county wasn't ready to do it, but once the state acted, the county, of course, had to fall in line and did so. So that was sort of the start of the journey. And then throughout, we've really looked at areas where we wanted to do more than maybe the state or the county. You know, this governor set the minimum rules because there are some counties in the very northern part of California with no cases and expects county public health officers to adopt rules specific for their regions. But we want to go further than the state or the county, especially when it came to protecting workers. So we limited occupancy to 40% of normal in any essential business that was open. We require plexiglass between cashiers and the people in the stores. We require face coverings and physical distancing, even though the county overruled their public health officer at the Board of Supervisors, and they're allowing it. And we did that for two reasons. First and foremost, our job is to protect public health and well-being. That is the number one responsibility of government. And we thought it was important to do that. But it's also important for our economy. If people are allowed to go into stores without wearing face coverings, a lot of people won't shop at all. It's going to actually hurt business. And so we felt there was an obligation to both protect the workers as well as the people, our residents who want to go into those stores. So we have kept some stronger rules in place than the county. Not that many, but that is one in particular that we feel very strongly about. And the council ratified again at our last meeting on Thursday night. David?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So, you know, the mayor makes the point that Palm Springs demographic, obviously we had people in a little more of a population in the higher risk group. So we did need to get out in front of this. But what we were working against was, as you can appreciate, this collective psyche of the community, because this is unprecedented. No one ever believed things were going to shut down like this. And so the fact that we even had to go there, we needed to do this with all the authority of local government, but yet this was uncharted territory. We never had to do this before. So we moved forward, and then things started to really move fast. You know, no one was going to think Coachella was canceled, and then we're going to reschedule it. Well, then that gets undone, and so we're like, all of a sudden we had trying to put our fingers in the dike to keep the flooding out, and then you just realize you're just not going to be able to do this. This is a major, serious public health issue. This is going to change society as we know it, and then our local economy collapses, of course, which is built on tourism that we spent the last 15 years building. So all these things came together, and knowing we had to act, but more importantly, the safety of our citizens was the first thing. And now we got to start thinking about how we do our reentry. So it's been a long journey. It's been a very uncomfortable journey, but yet what I can say, and this is from a public policy standpoint for all of you who think about these things, the emotional labor of this for the organization, our police, our first responders, our safety people who are out there every day dealing with this, potentially putting themselves at risk, and everyone else, the emotional labor of this, what is known as, it's not in the job description of police and fire and nurses and social workers and all the people in the public sector, but yet you have to deal with the pain and anguish, and it's burnout. It leads to burnout. And so managers like the mayor and the council and myself have to take into effect the toll this has on our workers. And so that's an important part to keep in mind as we move through this process of making sure they're okay and understanding and being empathetic to that emotional labor, so we can do what we can to help mitigate that.
Most definitely. Thank you so much. And this leads perfectly into my next question. I'm curious what the communication between state and local government looks like, as well as county and local government. I think this crisis is showing the average citizen there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And Mayor, you had mentioned that you were acting before the county did, and they set minimum, and you're going above that. So how does that communication look like?
Sure, and I think it's probably different in my role than David. So I think we probably will have different answers to this. I mean, for me, it is staying in regular touch with our county supervisor and letting him know what we're doing. I probably speak to our congressman, Representative Raul Ruiz, more than any elected official, other than maybe some council members, because one, he, is a public health expert and an emergency medical doctor, as well as our congressman. So we've been talking about public health measures and what data we need, and he's been great about getting Valley-specific data for us. So we're just not mushed in with the county from the local hospitals. And yesterday we sent a letter that went to Speaker Pelosi and Leader McConnell and several others, as well as Dr. Ruiz, about the need to help replace lost revenue in local governments, because unlike some of the other programs, we don't get a dime. Cities under 500,000 people or counties don't get a dime, not for emergency medical, not for police, not for fire. So the hit for us is so much more significant. So I've been reaching out to those offices as well, spoken to people in the governor's office. So we keep in regular communication with other elected officials. There are probably 2 White House briefing calls a week. The U.S. Conference of Mayors is meeting several times a week. So I'm on all of those calls, getting information. And also we shared our financial information with them so they can go advocate in DC or the League of Cities in Sacramento. The other thing we've been working on, both staff and me in my role as mayor, have been working with the state on when we are allowed to reopen. Let's just use restaurants, for example. They may have less capacity than they had before. They may have requirements. We don't know yet what those will be, but we've been advocating to allow us to open parking lots or major streets to let restaurants expand their footprint, to have more outdoor dining. The weather's perfect for it here in Palm Springs and the Valley, and we really want to help our local businesses. So we've been communicating with state agencies as well as with the elected officials.
And what I would add to that is, this is an intergovernmental relations thing in terms of the communication. So I would say the mayor is the expert on dealing with, the congressman and the state individuals. That's been his specialty, and he does that well. It has to be a team effort. So the mayor is really focused there. What from my perspective, the e-leadership, the electronic leadership, the emerging trend in public management is how do you communicate within the organization and without. What this COVID experience has done, it has moved that whole discussion to a place much more accelerated than it would have been. So all these Zoom meetings, all these virtual meetings, all the different ways we communicate are hugely important for public managers. That's where they were going to begin with the technology and smart cities, but now it's exacerbated. So in this crisis particularly, the e-leadership skills of all public managers in every organization and every public management level is become increasingly important. How you communicate internally, externally, and more importantly, on the intergovernmental side, which the mayor was talking about earlier. And so, and I would actually say for Palm Springs, the county government, the state government, the federal government, they're not reaching out to us so much. The burden is on us to reach out to them. And that's what the mayor's been doing. That's what council has wanted us to do. And that makes all the difference, because you have to make sure that your voice is heard. You truly have to do that. And that's part of the whole e-leadership trend.
Wow. So yeah, it as I think we could have anticipated, it seems like there's a lot of communication going on and a lot behind the scenes. That's impressive. So with the fiscal year ending on June 30th, and you have mentioned a significant loss of revenue in Palm Springs, the city council declared a fiscal emergency. I'm curious, what does this mean exactly, and how will this impact your constituents?
Do you want to start on that one, David?
Yeah, I'll start on that. So the bottom line of this is we're going to take somewhere between a $70 and $80 million hit, a budget deficit over the next, from March through probably end of next June. So in about a 15, 16 month period. That's unprecedented. You can't fix that really without fundamentally changing government. Now, government, you look at what the state is saying and what they're losing, and you look at what the county's going to lose, local governments. But let's just take Palm Springs for an example. That's not what we do. We don't reduce services, we create services. And so we're going from a high level of service down to what we're going to be forced to realign into basically what's going to be our priority? Are we just going to do police and fire, nothing else? And are we even going to be able to do that well? So this is hugely impactful, hugely important, both from a public policy standpoint of what does this look like going forward? And does it get back to normal? We don't anticipate it will for some time. And so what do we do in the meantime? So we're looking at talking to council this coming week and the following week of how we realign all our services. But what I have to tell you, it's not going to be easy. The community will suffer, the city staff will suffer, but we're all in this together and we have no choice but to do it. Now, that goes back to the question you asked before on the communication. What the mayor's been pushing is, okay, how do we get some aid from the state and the county and the federal government? And so to the extent that we can do that successfully, it will help mitigate some of the cuts that we have to make.
And I would add, because you do look at this as an elected official, the way I look at it is what is really best, right, for our residents? What is the best way to look at making these kind of reductions? What are the primary obligations that we need to do? And how do we spread it out in a way that minimizes the impacts to our residents? We are a very high level service city. We have a convention center, we have an airport, we have 5+ million people come to visit us every year. So we're different than most other cities. But I think the communication piece, as David mentioned, is so key. So when we make decisions, whether it's the face coverings, we don't do those in closed session with just our attorneys. We do all those in public, and we're going to do the budget in public. We shared all the different ways we spend money with the public in the staff report. We're going to have at least 2 meetings, get public input, and then make difficult decisions. But we're going to focus on how we can be as efficient as we can with every dollar. Every single dollar has to be maximum efficiency. And the most important thing is being transparent. If you have good news or bad news, you need to share it with people, because if people know you're being transparent, if you're being truthful, if you're telling them the facts, it's a lot easier for people to work with you. And we saw that when we went out front on the stay-at-home order. Our residents and business, we didn't have a non-compliance the way we're seeing in other places, because people know we're being honest with them, because we always do things in public meetings in a transparent way. And I think that's going to be so important as we look at the fiscal implications too, that they know they have input. What they want us to do is going to impact our decision, and they're part of the process. And I think that is so important as you go through any difficult situation, is to make sure that everyone feels that they're part of the process and their voice is heard.
Definitely. And I couldn't agree more about being transparent. I think it's better all around. And actually going off of that, there was a special budget meeting held by the Palm Springs City Council yesterday. Can you inform us about the implementation of policy moving forward? What was discussed? Any updates?
Sure. We actually moved that to Thursday because we wanted to make sure the public had all the information with enough time to absorb it. And we didn't think only having 2 days over a weekend would be enough. So we're doing that on Thursday. So we'll have more to report after that.
Oh, well, that's wonderful, and goes with the transparency that you want people to be as aware and educated as possible. So moving on then, economic recovery is critical in the coming months and possibly years of the fallout of COVID-19. As the mayor and city manager of Palm Springs, where do you even begin that process? As you had talked about, this is uncharted, unprecedented. Where does local government begin?
Well, I think a few things. One is we look at efficiencies, right, to make every dollar stretch as far as we can. But I pulled together a tourism business task force. So all of the tourism and business organizations we have, from the Chamber of Commerce to our local merchants, to our big hotels, small hotels, and others. And we've been meeting once a week. And we've been really focused on having marketing campaigns ready to go once we can welcome people back safely to Palm Springs. And we know that people aren't going to be traveling as far. People may not want to go overseas and go on long plane flights to get here. But that means people from the West Coast are not going to be traveling as far either. So how do we realign to focus on our drive market? People who still want to go somewhere, but want to go somewhere they feel safe. How do we organize our marketing? The fact that we have great trails and outdoor activities, that not everything is in a small theater, or the things you might do in Manhattan, for example. And how do we focus on making people understand we're going to protect their health? So for example, continuing with face coverings, that's a way to let people know we're protecting their health. Working to get our dining to be able to expand onto city streets so tables don't have to be right up against each other. That's the kind of thing that will help people feel safe to come back to Palm Springs, which will help our local businesses and revitalize our economy. And we know it'll take time, but we don't want to wait till we're told we can reopen. We want to be ready for that moment ahead of time.
And what I'd add to that is, public management is based on government and business relations today, particularly the importance of the symbiosis of the two. We each depend on each other. So what the mayor's laid out is what we spend a good part of our day doing is business, economic development, as much as public management, because it's so integral to what we do as a city, which is evident by once those business engines start to cool down or go away, the whole system starts to collapse because we can't deliver the services. So the government business relations is important. And so what the mayor indicated, the task force is, our focus is on reentry and recovery just as much as keeping what we have to do to keep police officers on the street. They're equally as important.
Yes, and with that, how is Palm Springs going about the business recovery plan? I know we are looking to Governor Newsom, and he has his plan, but as a city, and as you said, you're very focused on recovery at the moment, and tourism is huge in Palm Springs. But with your businesses, how are you working going off of what the governor has to say?
Well, for the most part, we're following the governor's rules as far as what businesses can be open. So for example, allowing retail to be open with curbside delivery and pickup right now, and hopefully soon with physical distancing and face coverings. So we're following that. But even our tourism dollars, which we've saved because we're not doing tourism marketing, but we have put some of it into promoting businesses that are open. So promoting restaurants that you can do delivery and takeout from, promoting stores that you can buy online from, promoting stores you can buy your gift cards for the holidays now because you help them survive this. We also are one of the cities in the area that has put a eviction moratorium, not just for renters in homes, but also for businesses. And we will allow them to pay the back rent up to 6 months after the emergency is lifted. So that's, from a policy perspective, we felt it was important to protect our small businesses. The big box stores are allowed to be open right now, even though they often sell the same things as our small retail. And so we wanted to protect our small retail. That's what makes Palm Springs, and I think so many communities, so special, is the unique businesses that exist nowhere else in the world that you find on main streets. And that's what we're trying to do. We also have done several webinars for the business community, as well as for residents, but to let them know every program that's available for them, where they can apply, how they can apply. Because that's really important. Our business community is so important to us in the city. And people miss their businesses. They love, the little mom and pop stores and the great boutiques and all the great restaurants that they don't see anywhere else. It's why people love to live here and why people want to visit. So we're working with them hand in hand.
Wonderful. That's great that you're being so supportive. I'm from a town with many small business. My mom works in one, and as well as my sister. You want to keep those alive, and you really hope they survive this. And I know they're struggling, so it's so nice to hear Palm Springs is doing so much for them. And Mayor Kors, this question is for you. I believe you have recently created, or you are a part of a mayor's task force. I'm really interested how all the mayors within California are working together. And, as you may have mentioned, maybe sharing data, maybe, collaborating. Can you explain exactly what you plan to accomplish, these task forces, what the goal is and what you're working on?
Sure. And one of the things that you find in a crisis is a lot of the entities that have been pulled together for various purposes that are now meeting a lot more. So the League of Cities, which is made up of all the cities in California, does regular meetings, usually regionally, so by county. And so every 2 weeks, there's a call with the mayors where we share information and ideas with a representative from the league, what we want them to advocate for in Sacramento for us. The US Conference of Mayors has had weekly and sometimes twice a week conferences, and different mayors present ideas that they've had, what's been working in their city. And together, over 125 mayors submitted our fiscal situation so they could advocate for us with the leadership in the House and Senate. So all those are different ways we share information. In the Coachella Valley, we have the Coachella Valley Association of Governments that are made up of all the cities here. And the executive committee is primarily the mayors. And so we've met to discuss issues unique to the Coachella Valley, including potentially arguing to the governor that it shouldn't just be a county, we should look at it regionally. If the Coachella Valley meets the governor's criteria, even if the county doesn't, can we start to reopen sooner with safeguards in place? So those are all the different kinds of things these government entities can do. And you hear from each other. And we don't always agree, right? At the meeting when we first went to the stay-at-home order, the other cities did not want to do it yet. They didn't feel ready to do it. That's fine, right? Everyone got to make their own decision until the state acted. But at least we were able to share the data, why we did it, and hear the reasons they felt they wanted to wait and see what the state did.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I know we keep coming back to the economic crisis right now, but it's impacting every single American and Californian. So on the government side of that, however, as most businesses have been closed or barely operational or for nearly 2 months, businesses have been struggling, and many Californians have recently become unemployed with skyrocketing numbers. Consumerism has decreased. As you said, we're trying to get people out, especially to support local businesses more right now. This also causes a decrease in the amount of taxes the government collects, especially local taxes. How has this affected the city of Palm Springs? And if there has been a large impact, how does the city government plan to combat this loss of revenue?
Sure. You want to start, David?
Yeah, and the mayor and I can probably talk so much at length on the effect it's going to have on our budget and all the possible things we're going to have to do to reorganize around this new reality. So to do our mandate of living within our means of a balanced budget. And that's the second part of this question. But I think what we also are recognizing at the local level is that this is having a huge social impact. As you said, we hear story after story of small merchants, they're dying in the sense that their whole life savings is in their business and they see it vanishing before their eyes. They want to work. They want to be there. Our residents want to be social, want to go to restaurants, want to be in the retails, want to be on the streets, want to do our gatherings. That's what Palm Springs is all about. So the social toll on that is something now that local government has to get involved in. As I mentioned earlier, the emotional labor, it's not only at City Hall, it's in the whole community. So we have to be almost the psychological, sociological aspect of public management training is as important now as the ability to deal with the economic development in the budget. So this is the dynamic of this COVID, different than the Great Recession, different than other crises we've been through. This is much more widespread and has deeper effects. And that social component will also affect how the recovery comes back. Do these local merchants have the ability mentally, psychologically, economically to come back after they've had this? And so we are going to try to support them as best we can. Like, so for example, the mayor said, our downtown merchants, we're doing everything we can at the state level to loosen some restrictions so they can have additional dining outside on our streets. Those are the kinds of things we really have to focus on. Mayor?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I think, the budget impacts are enormous. We're probably the largest percentage budget hit than any city I'm aware of, clearly the most in the county, because our economy is a tourism economy. So when you lose the visitors, 5 million people a year, it really goes quickly. And our prime season, February, March, April, May, June, we had February and a little bit of March. And by March, people weren't traveling. So the hit on our economy is just enormous, and all the people who are unemployed as a result is, it's truly heartbreaking. So getting that back up and running in a safe way has to be the focus to get our lives back to normal. So it's both pieces. It's the piece about the economic hit, but I think David really hit on such an important point, is the social interpersonal hit, right? I mean, everyone who has a family member who's been sick or has lost a family member is just so devastating, and it's been so hard on so many people. But as you get into 2 months of this, people feel really isolated, especially people who live alone. And providing outlets, that they now can play tennis and swim and play golf is going to help, right? It has to be done safely, but the more that is allowed so people can feel connected to another human being, the better. And, even this, every Monday night, I have a group that we get together with on a Zoom, because you have to connect with people, and seeing people is different than talking on the phone. It just is. And I think technology enables us to do more of that. In Palm Springs, we each have a district, all 5 of us. And so I'm doing my second meeting on Monday with the leadership of all the neighborhood organizations in my district, so I can hear from them while we're seeing each other, not just on email. And I think those personal connections are just so important, and something we have to be really conscious of as well.
And Maddie, I would add, you asked the question, what do you do with this kind of deficit? And I think this is the public management lesson here. And if I could convey this to the audience, as public managers, there's an easy way here and a difficult way. The easy way, and this is sort of counterintuitive, but the easy way is the hardest way for the community. So go with this conceptually. The easy thing to do, you got a $50 million deficit. What are we gonna do? Well, we just have to cut everything. Okay, on one hand, as difficult as that is for the community and the organization, it's the easiest thing to public manage, because then the expectation goes away, the expense goes away, you're gonna have a balanced budget, you've got a very narrow focus of what your service delivery is, and that's all you focus on. That's hard on the community, right? The magic of this, the real leadership, the real government skill of a public manager is you say, okay, we're going to make something out of nothing, right? So we're not going to cut as deep as we can or should. We're going to do something lesser, and then we're going to try and manage it. This is the hard part of management. All right. So if we do this, we've got to constantly be watching revenues. We have to figure out ways to do things more efficient, stretching them out. It's a constant monitoring. And then in this situation, it's going to be adjusting daily, weekly, monthly, and managing expectations, because you're still going to be expected to do a certain amount more of public service. So how do managers do that? So all I'm saying is it the prudent thing to do? This number is so big, we're probably going to have to lay off more than we want to. But at the same time, if we don't do as much as we probably should and try and manage it over the next year, that's going to be the real skill of a manager, is can you almost make something out of nothing and still keep the city a viable, sustainable financial entity? And that's going to be the challenge. So this is going to be, as this plays out, it's going to be a lot of lessons.
Yes, and I'm glad Palm Springs has someone of your experience to help with this. But I agree. It's hard. I think everyone's thinking day to day, short term, but especially policy, government, politics wise, this is long term. I mean, you got a long road ahead of you and a lot of work cut out. So. And just good luck to everyone doing what you can and managing to make sure you're doing it efficiently and to the best of your ability, which I'm sure you both in the city of Palm Springs will do. And with that long-term mindset, the CDC, Dr. Fauci, and many infectious disease experts warn that COVID-19 will or could possibly reappear during this upcoming flu season. Is this something the city of Palm Springs is concerned about? Does this alter any plans you have or are working on, considering, even though things are getting better slowly now, they could peak and rise again in the coming months?
Yeah, and I think it obviously ties to many pieces, but on the budget front is, putting together, which staff did, best case scenario, worst case scenario, and worst case scenario would include a second surge, and trying to budget somewhere in the between, as sort of David was mentioning, but watching it each month and adjusting it as needed. For tourism, which is the basis of our economy, we know that's always slower to rebound than some other things, especially in this situation. So we have to be really conscious of that and look long term, right? You don't want to make so many cuts and reductions that you basically do nothing but provide police and fire services. But you don't want to go too short where if there's a second surge, you end up having to go even deeper because you spend all this money. So it's trying to find a reasonable middle ground that's cautious enough and plan for a long-term slowdown while not eliminating services, just doing them in a different and more creative way, and maybe less often. Things open less hours, and things that at least continue to provide services, especially to those most in need in our community.
And I would think, from a very social standpoint, it is, I think through this, it's going to be difficult once the economy starts to reopen, and it does, even if it's in whatever phases it gets to, and then you have a surge. So I think it's going to be hard to put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak. I'm not certain society will allow us to go back to where we are right now. And I'm just saying that from a social viewpoint, that's going to be hard for government to recreate this, given the effects. So what that means is we have to prepare to keep people safe. And my sense is whether it's the plexiglass everywhere in public buildings and elsewhere, or the continual masks in some form or another, face coverings, and all the other things that we need to do, and basically go down that road to keep the economy going. So between now and then, I think governments have to figure out a way that if it resurges, that we're not going to be able to get it back into this quarantine. We're going to have to figure out ways to do it without, is my sense. So I think we need to be prepared for that.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And one of the things we've done is we've worked with our Chamber of Commerce and one of our big hotels and some merchants to create a buying pool to get all of those important supplies, hand sanitizer, wipes, face coverings, gloves, that businesses could buy at cost. So they're all ready. And our businesses here really want to come across as safe. They understand why that's so important for them, for their customers, for visitors. And so that effort is already underway so that we can get those to folks and help them get them at a much lower price. Because if people see hand sanitizers at every store, they're going to feel a lot more comfortable than if they don't. And so it's one, to help on public safety, but also help people know that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe.
And to you future public managers out there, I can't emphasize enough the importance of managing symbols. Because, so for example, what the mayor just said, one of the things that we're going to be doing is when people start coming back to Palm Springs, you're going to see some of our downtown maintenance people cleaning more thoroughly, more frequently, in your face. You touch something, someone's going to be running after you to wipe it up. Now, that's probably exaggeration, but that is a symbol. It will makes good public policy sense, but B, it's also symbolic that Palm Springs is open. We are concerned about your safety, and we're cleaning to make sure that you feel comfortable here. And those are very important symbols to manage.
Yes, I could not agree more about the social aspect. I think it has been a hard 2 months for everyone, and especially starting to see some other states reopen maybe faster than us, just that antsy cabin fever feeling. And I, just in personal conversations with my family and friends, the thought of, wow, will we really be in be under the shelter in place order for all of 2020? Will this happen? And I think it's a really hard pill to swallow. And I think that's why the herd immunity is being thrown around. I think socially people need that option of starting to go out, doing it as safely as possible, and looking to the government state and local to help us find the safest ways we can slowly start to move forward. Because just the thought of this lasting, indefinitely or much longer, I think is scary for everyone. So I completely agree. I think the social aspect is so important. And Mayor, you had mentioned your team coming up with best and worst case scenarios, and I have a twofold question. If you could summarize your concerns and your priorities in the city of Palm Springs for both the short term and the long term. I know we've talked about having to go with the flow and adjust as the data changes and the science changes. But at the moment, can you inform us, if you could summarize again? I know there's so much to it, but just kind of short term and then long term.
Well, short term, we want to make sure we're keeping our residents and workers safe. And so as we start seeing things open, and as the county allowed golf, tennis, pickleball, swimming, we took another 2 weeks before we allowed some of those, because we wanted to make sure that it's one thing if you're going to choose to play tennis with someone not in your household. It's another for the workers who are going to have to interact with every single person who goes to that tennis court. And as a city, we are very focused on protecting workers, not just city workers, but all workers. That's why we have gone further when it comes to the big box stores and supermarkets and pharmacies. Those folks see 100, 200 people a day, and their lives should not be put at risk any more than they already are just doing their jobs to help all of us out. So I think short term, we're going to make sure we're going extra distance to protect workers and protect our vulnerable populations. We're also making sure we are a resource for all of our businesses, so they know how to get loans, how to people know how to get unemployment and all those things. We have folks who will talk to them on the phone. We have a hotline that is answered. We have all those services. Long term, it's really about getting our lives back to normal, right? The social aspects, our businesses, and doing it in a way that's safe. Knowing that until there's a vaccine or a cure, COVID's going to be around. So keep doing everything we can for safety, because that's going to make people feel more comfortable and be safer when they interact with others. And it's going to help our economy. And that will enable us to do things like have our community centers open more and our swimming pool open and all the other things we get to do as a city that are benefits to our residents. So I think it's that twofold approach, but always keeping the public's health and safety first and foremost in our minds, because that government has to do. And I'm really honored of the way our city has come together, and our residents and businesses, because they trust us, has followed the rules. We haven't had to close businesses down. We haven't had to cite people. People have really responded because they know we're here fighting for them. And that's such an important thing to continue to communicate, that we are working with you, for you, because that's the job of government.
Definitely. Thank you. Once again, I am agreeing with everything you're saying. And I have those exact conversations with my family when just before this webinar, we were talking about, the perfect example everyone keeps using is restaurants. And the exact thing we were saying, well, okay, if you eat with your family, but what about the waiter? What about the hostess? What about the busboy, the dish? What about those other people that you could be infecting? So there's so much to it. And I think, the whole thought process with when the face coverings were required or are required is you aren't just doing it for yourself, you are doing it for other people. It is a selfless thing to do. It's to consider those around you, and you don't know by looking at them if they could be part of the vulnerable population or how many people they have come in contact with, or what's another scary aspect of COVID-19 is some people don't show symptoms. So you could have it and not know it, or various degrees. So that is wonderful. I know this webinar so far has been a little dreary, a little sad. So I want to take the opportunity. It's a hard time, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I'd love to open it up to you, Mayor Kors and City Manager Reddy, for any words of wisdom or optimism for your constituents, those within the County of Riverside, or just Californians in general. Any optimistic words you can throw our way to make us feel better during this time?
Sure. I think orders that were put in place and the amazing response of residents and businesses to following them kept us from that worst case scenario. The projections, if we didn't do this, were horrific. I mean, just the thousands of people who would have died right here in the county, and the hospitals would have been overflowing, where people with heart attacks wouldn't have had beds. I mean, all that so far has been averted because people trusted what they heard and followed the rules. And that gives me so much optimism and hope. One, that we'll get through this together, but two, that we're a community that cares about each other. We're going to look out for each other. It's not, every person for themselves. It's understanding that in situations like this, we have to come together. And the fact that we have just gives me so much hope for where we're going to come out of this. And that I think people really appreciate themselves and their families and friends more than ever. That reminder not to take a single day for granted, make the most of every day. Remember to tell people you love them. When you go into a grocery store or you see your post person, thank them. Show the gratitude that, one, we live in a place where we actually can take walks and be outside, not in some really dense city, and really just appreciate everything we have for what it is and thank the people around us. And that creates such a great community environment that when we come out of this, who's not going to want to come and visit us? So I'm very optimistic for where we'll get. We have such great entrepreneurial spirit here and all these unique businesses that you don't always see in some big cities that can survive and pay rent and be supported by the community. So all that gives me hope. I'm really hopeful, actually.
And what I would add to that is, we need to approach this from a solutions perspective. We're certainly not giving up on anything at City Hall. We're not taking anything for granted. We're not giving up. So from a solutions perspective, what we have to think about is bringing into existence what our city looks like on the other side of this and as we move through it. So that's our focus. And, one of the lessons of leadership is you never, things are so terrible. We're not going to make it through this. It's so awful. Come follow me. No, it's like, all right, we got a problem, but this is how we're going to fix it. And we're moving forward. Come follow us, and as the mayor said, our community particularly, there's a lot of trust of what the council has built. And this is the human element. And because at its core, government is a human enterprise. And so our people that are helping us implement these things, they connect with people out on the street. And so for you public managers out there, I know you know about the whole street level bureaucracy thing. So that is more important now than ever. So our employees out on the street, that's a huge thing, and that creates that connection, and it gives our community hope. So that's why it's counterintuitive to reduce our employees, even though we're probably going to have to, but how do you keep that connection with the community? And I think that's important.
Definitely. Well, those are the questions I have. This ends the discussion part of the format. Thank you so much. Your answers were so informational. We are entering the open Q&A format. We already have quite a few questions, but for any audience members who don't know, there is a Q&A chat option. So if you have any questions, go ahead. Perfect, we have more coming in. Go ahead and type them in there, and I'll make sure to get to them. For my fellow ambassadors who I know are itching to ask their questions, I want to give everyone the opportunity to ask their questions. So I think I'll alternate between the Q&A box and an ambassador. So I will start with Mark Richards asked a question. He says he is 67 and has severe asthma. He is very concerned that the county is moving too quickly and not paying attention to the data and the county health restrictions. And the second part of it's very difficult to keep track of the restrictions at this point. Could you please review the restrictions? He's sorry if you would be repeating information, but he's curious.
Yeah, I'll try and keep it quick. We, as a city, have said we don't agree with the county removing face coverings and social distancing. Overturning your public health officials is something we don't believe should be done. And the county is the public health department for every government entity, school district, college district, city in the county. And so that was disappointing for us, and we've shared that. We don't have very many different restrictions. What we do have is if you're going to be inside a business that's open or in any other public space where you can't maintain 6-foot distancing, so even walking on the street, you need to have a face covering. Now, you don't have to have it if you're walking, you know, if I'm walking my dog and doing it myself or with my husband, we don't have to wear face coverings. But if we see someone, then we're going to come that close, we just put it on. You know, I keep a bandana around my neck. It's not that difficult, and it helps protect yourself and other people. Other than that, we have very similar rules. In public golf and pickleball, it's singles only right now. While in private course, private ones, they can do doubles if they want to manage it. It's up to them. Same rules on swimming. You have to keep 6 feet apart. So the main one for the public to know is that one is when you go into any business, you have to have a face covering, and you should always have one with you in case you're going to be within 6 feet of anyone. But we share the concern. If we go too quickly and we have a surge, it's going to set everything back. And everyone's worked so hard. Every single resident business has sacrificed to get us to this point, and we don't want to mess it up, I'll say.
Definitely. Oh, sorry, we have an ambassador who has a question, but she can't get her mic unmuted. So if it's okay, I will go ahead and ask it for her. Sorry, Arlette, but so everyone knows. Oh, or maybe, perfect.
All right, hello, Mayor, and hello, City Manager. So my question was, does the City of Palm Springs have any new projects in transportation or renovating community buildings with there being less public traffic? That was my question.
In fact, we're actually stopping some projects. And David, do you want to sort of go into what we're doing with the goal of being able to utilize that money for essential services during this window?
Yeah, it's this interesting mix. So there's some private development that was occurring and had to stop. And then on the public side, we're looking at rolling back some of our capital projects, whether it's street resurfacing and some other things, just because we may need those dollars for operation. So it's going to be a mix. And I think we're going to have a sort of a flexible policy on this going forward over the next 12 months of what's going to be a priority and what we can delay.
Right, but we have seen 2 of our bigger housing projects that they are moving forward. A third one is moving forward. That's really important because we know how important housing is here. So we're really glad to see that. And on our council meeting Thursday night, a luxury hotel who's spending a lot of money on plans came forward with their plan, which was approved by council. So while some projects have stalled, we are seeing other ones move forward that are more longer term out, such as a hotel that would be open in 2023, for example.
Wow, 2023, that seems so far away. I have another question in the Q&A box. With almost every city having great budget deficits due to the coronavirus, is it time to review and look to joining some services with other cities?
Well, it's interesting. I can go quickly. So for example, many cities in the Coachella Valley have the sheriff provide their public safety services. That's not something I see us doing. Of course, it'll be up to council, as it always is, but having our own police chief and police department that reflects our values, it's so important in a city like ours. You know, we have had policies in place for decades where we don't ask people their immigration status. And we work with communities. Every one of our 48 neighborhoods has an officer assigned to them. So when they have questions, they know who to call. And that's so important to the fabric of our city. County ambulance service, for example, is so late in responding to emergencies on a regular basis that they're writing us a check for $50,000 a year to pay fines for being late. So we have our own fire department. All of them are paramedics who go out. Are we gonna have to look at that level of service? Of course, we have to look at everything, but there's some real value in having your own staff who can provide your service as opposed to a county of millions of people being commingled. That doesn't necessarily reflect the values and priorities of your community and your residents.
And I would add, you know, that goes to the heart of the policy of should you run government like a business? Well, absolutely, until you shouldn't. So again, what the mayor talked about was the values. The values of the community are so important. Here's another example. The mayor talked about the paramedics. The city provides that extra. not the best business decision, but a great public policy decision because it's saving lives. Another one is our animal shelter. So our values in our community is a no-kill shelter. And I think everyone's familiar with that, but we don't kill animals every 5, 7, 12 days like most shelters do if they're not adopted out. That cost us $1.6 million a year. Now, is that a smart business decision? No, because Palm Desert pays $300,000 a year. So where do you draw the line? Now, we had the resources to do it. It was a community value. So in that case, it makes all the perfect sense because that was important to the community. Now, obviously, we're going to have to review that as your questioner asked. And will we then go to the county shelter and start killing all our animals? No, probably not. But what we will do is reassess this and probably modify it. And that's going to be the real goal of good public management is sort of how do you have your cake and eat it too? You keep your no-kill shelter, but you live within your budget. So that's the real heavy lifting to do here.
Great, thank you so much. Next, we have fellow Ambassador Paula Loera, and she has a question. We can go ahead and unmute her. Maybe not.
Hello, City Manager Reddy and Mayor Corus. I had a question regarding agriculture within the Coachella Valley. I understand tourism is the #1 means of revenue for the city, but how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected agriculture and the local agriculture business? Are there any measures being taken to protect the farm workers in reference to the current situation?
David, do you want to start? I mean,
yeah, I would say so. So specifically in Palm Springs, that has not been the main focus. But what we do know is that it's a hugely important issue. You know, we're concerned. You know, the food chain in California particularly is hugely important with regards to agriculture. In our own valley, we know that there's always been issues in terms of how fairly people are treated and are they safe. All those things are important. So, you know, to the extent that we can have any impact on that, I'm certain that the city council would be open to it. Mayor, you may want to add to that.
sure. And we, you know, for any workers in Palm Springs, we don't have the typical agricultural businesses that we see in the East Valley. There are protections required of employers. And that's really important. I really feel it needs to be done for workers everywhere, all the time. I mean, that's such a high priority for us. Our agriculture business, which is newer, is in cannabis, where we have been an early leader, the first city in Riverside County to have medical cannabis. We quickly moved to recreational, and those workers do have protections in place. There are people working at grows, people working at manufacturing that does exist in Palm Springs. And all of those do have all the requirements about face coverings and all the other safety requirements that should be in place for workers in every single industry where anyone is working right now. It's a really important point. I'm really glad you raised it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I would like to, again, just remind our audience to go ahead and ask a question in the Q&A chat, and we will make sure we get to it. As for right now, we do have another question from Megan Bailey. Are you considering hiring a consulting firm?
That's not necessarily specific enough, but I can say this. We do sometimes work with consultants, and actually before this happened, before the emergency happened, we had brought on a consultant to really analyze all the different ways we spend money to promote tourism in Palm Springs. So we give money to the Greater Palm Springs Convention and Visitors Bureau. We have our own Palm Springs Tourism Bureau. We give money to a group called PS Resorts, the big hotels who do promotion for events. And there are many ways we support tourism. So we did bring a consultant in, and we'll be getting a report in about 10 days from now on how we could maximize that spending. And given we need to look at potential reductions in spending, it couldn't come at a better time. So that is one area where we have brought a consultant in. Another area is on parking. Again, we were working on it before this, as it looked like the Agua Caliente Band of Kuya Indians is planning a big arena in downtown Palm Springs. Well, how are we going to manage parking and services in a way that protects other businesses and residents while allowing this to be successful at the same time, because it could be a great boon for the economy. So we did bring in a parking consultant. So we bring them in specialty areas like that. I don't know if there's anything you would add, David, on consultants.
Yeah, so so consultants, it's important is you get as many data points of information as you can. That's hugely important. So consultants are important in that regard. My rule of thumb is I always try and emphasize with them now, don't tell us what we already know and don't tell us what we don't need to know. So consultants are important, but you just have to make sure that they're focused on the right kind of information that you need to interpret the problem.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your answer to that question. I'll now move on to Ambassador Aaron Walter. We will go ahead and get him unmuted next.
Thank you. Hi, thank you both for your time and for answering our questions. As you both know, 2020 is an election year. I just wanted to ask, has there been any discussions on what Election Day may look like in Palm Springs come November?
Sure, I can jump in, and David, you can add. I mean, I've been more involved on how it's going to look at a state level, that everyone, it appears, will be getting a vote by mail ballot. But there's also talk about making sure we have places for people to go who want to vote in person. But given we're going to need to maintain physical distancing and absent a cure or therapy by then, there'll be a lot more vote by mail balloting. Now, in Palm Springs, we're already about 2/3 vote by mail. So by the time we get to election day, most elections are pretty decided. I know when I ran both times, a month out, when people start getting their ballots, you are all in on your phone banks, on your door-to-door, which again may change, right? We may not be able to do traditional door-to-door campaigns the way we do in small cities. It's gonna be a lot more phone and text and mail. So that's all gonna be important as well. So we are looking at that. I think as a city, we'll be doing whatever is in line with the county who runs the elections. But as someone who's run for office twice and worked on campaigns since I was 13 years old, I'm a political junkie, really starting to evaluate how we're gonna have to change our communication dynamic with voters, right? Social media is, I think, even more present than it was 6 months ago. People are so much used to now being online more to talk to their friends. So that kind of friend-to-friend campaigning, which I think is really effective, right? When you hear from your friends why you support someone, that's going to be integrated into even more campaigns moving forward, especially at the local level. David, do you have any thoughts on, from a government perspective? I put out the
Mayor, I think you covered it fairly well. From just the internal government perspective, obviously our city clerk runs our local elections, and so we're set up to do vote by mail. That's, as the mayor indicated, that's primarily what most voters in Palm Springs do. So I think we can handle any challenge if that trend expands, but we'll be ready under any circumstance.
Yeah, and the other thing is, because California now has same-day registration, making sure that people can do that when they vote by mail, right? So ideally, everyone will get a ballot, whether you're registered or not. I don't know if that's going to happen in California, and you could fill it out and register at the same time. I mean, from my perspective, everyone should automatically be registered to vote. And it's unfortunate that we are seeing voter suppression become such a big thing in parts of this country. And California, fortunately, is going the other way. The more people who vote, the more people who feel they have an ownership stake in their government, the better society we're going to have and the better government we're going to have.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. I agree. Voting is so important, and it's nice to see that Governor Newsom recently passed that executive order where everyone will receive a mail-in ballot, especially given maybe that second wave hits during flu season. Next, we have a question from Genevieve, another ambassador. So we will go ahead and unmute her.
Hi, hello. Hello, City Manager and Mayor. I have a question in regards to the environment. What does the data say about carbon emissions and electricity use? And has there been any changes to environmental policies in this time?
Sure, I'll start with that. Palm Springs has been a leader on these issues, and I'm chair of something known as Desert Community Energy, which is an entity that buys the power for all Palm Springs customers. People can opt out and stay with Edison, and we're the first city anywhere in the region. The default is 100% carbon-free power, and that started in April. So we are moving to 100% carbon-free power in Palm Springs. Clearly, I think everyone could tell, especially my friends in Los Angeles, how much cleaner the air is with cars off the road. And we realize the damage done by our capitalist society and commercialization to the planet. And short term, sure, people make money and all that's great, but we're going to destroy our environment and destroy our species if we don't step up. So while we're a small city, we can cut our carbon emissions about 40% through this plan. What we're doing is the equivalent of taking every car, motorcycle, and truck off the roads in Palm Springs through the carbon-free energy. No other city's doing it in this region, in Riverside County or the Inland Empire, but we need more people to be active in pushing them to do so. And it's such good policy to do that. And at the same time, any of the profits that would normally go to shareholders actually go back to the government that has to be used for sustainability efforts. So we could build solar with it. We could provide low-income solar. We are working to go, we were door to door, now by phone, to reach people who are eligible for discounts, low-income people, to get them enrolled in the low-income discount that the utilities don't necessarily publicize by calling people, but we are doing that. So these are great programs out there, and it's going to take all of us. The only way we're going to be able to get through this environmental crisis is to look at what slowing down a little bit is doing and investing in green energy and moving towards 100% carbon-free power. So I'm really glad you asked that question. I can tell we share this value, and really proud of Palm Springs. We have a sustainability commission that is always looking for ways we can do this. We're one of the first cities to require solar on new home construction before the state had their plan. So we're really trying to be at the forefront on these issues. So thank you for that.
Wonderful. I agree. Climate change and environmental policy. I see your EPA background.
Yes, that was my early hat.
A little bit. It's so important, and even during times like these, there are other problems and other things going on. And yeah, I know Jen is as well. We're in LA, and there is a difference in the smog, I can tell you right now. Next, we have a question from another ambassador, Camila.
Hello, Mayor and City Manager. I had a quick question in regards to the homelessness population in Palm Springs. I know you both mentioned that you are focusing on constructing hotels, and it made me curious to whether if you are implementing some type of temporary housing for the homeless population or any type of services to help aid this during the crisis right now.
Sure, and I can start out. So homelessness, social services, all those kind of programs are the responsibility of the counties. They get funding from the state and federal government for them. That said, there was one homeless crisis team for the entire Coachella Valley provided by the county. So the city council stepped up and we provided our own crisis team and then a second one through a grant from the Desert Healthcare District. But we still felt we needed more resources than we were getting allocated. So Mayor Pro Tem Holstage and I, who are Affordable Housing and Homelessness Committee, worked together with our Assembly member, Chad Mays, and we were able to get $10 million allocated from the state last year. The funding's not here yet, but it's going to be here very soon. Really focused on building infrastructure, the majority of it, for housing for people who are currently homeless, and about 10 to 15% could be used to prevent homelessness through rent vouchers. During this crisis, an organization we fund while in the desert is open as a cooling center during the day. We fund Martha's Village and Kitchen to provide services to get people signed up for healthcare and general assistance and food programs. We fund one of the big food banks through Find Food Bank, and they've done another through their funding. We also moved our shelter, and the only one in the West Valley, to the Palm Springs High School. We so appreciate them making it available so we could have more people with 6-foot distancing to keep people safe. And the county and their staff have gotten money from the state for vouchers. So we have hotels and motels that are accepting vouchers for homeless folks as well. They've mostly targeting people who are highly vulnerable. So people 65 and older, people with health conditions and families. But we have at least 2 motels that are pretty full with people who would otherwise be homeless. The other thing we've done is we've amended our rules to say one of the criteria that's COVID-19 related that allows you to stay in a motel or a vacation rental or a hotel includes homelessness, but also someone who needs to leave their house and would otherwise be homeless because of domestic violence. Our one agency is full, and of course it's a huge concern right now. And we've had some hotels that have stepped up, the few that are open for emergency workers or people who work at the airport, who are donating rooms for victims of domestic violence. So it's important, if anyone knows anyone, to please let them know to reach out to the city, because we're really working on every one of those fronts to keep people safe, because right now it's more important than ever. So thank you for asking about that.
Definitely. I mean, the homeless population is a huge topic right now, as well as domestic violence, living, under the shelter in place order with possibly those who are experiencing that is horrible. So that's wonderful. We do have another question from Paola.
Hi, once again. My question was more so geared toward recreation and means of citizens being able to, go out and be in the public within keeping social distancing. You mentioned how isolating this experience can be, and I know in many news reports and things, people have been said that this time has kind of led people to go through the stages of grief. Are there any opportunities being offered in the community to help alleviate this? I know you mentioned some recreational areas were opened recently. Are there any opportunities for residents to partake in this within keeping social distancing?
Sure. So David and city staff worked with 2 council members on what the rules would be for various recreational activities that are allowed under state law. So do you want to sort of go through the process a little bit and what you came up with, the council adopted?
Sure. So we basically had to do with like tennis and pickleball, and the courts. How are we going to maintain social distancing? What's going to be the requirements? The face coverings, when they have to be worn and not. On our golf courses, how is that going to? How are those rules going to work? So the council subcommittee, basically we work together to take to council a set of rules that we believe will do everything we can on the social distancing. Now, Palm Springs particularly is unique in that we have all the trails, the mountain open trail. So that's another component, and that has been a great pleasure for people to go out and do it. And what we found is that people are really adhering to social distancing. So for example, when I'm out on the trails, when people get close to each other, they'll pull up their masks. And so people know what to do, and they're taking this seriously. So that's been an additional thing, benefit that we've had in the city.
Right. I would just add one thing Palm Springs has is we have public tennis courts, we have public pickleball courts. And it was important as private clubs got open that we opened the public ones for people who aren't a member of a private club or don't live in an HOA, so that everyone has the opportunity to do that. Encouraging people to walk, hiking is such a great benefit for so many people to get exercise. And also we were advocates to get people to be able to swim. There are a lot of people due to arthritis or medical conditions who have no other way to get exercise but swimming. And so as soon as we could allow swimming, initially 1 person at a time, and now a little more than that, we adopted that. So people have that outlet. And just being able to have that physical exercise. I know David's a hiker, so he's been doing that. I've been swimming, and just being able to do that and get out of your head a little bit and feel good and be out in nature, be in the water, depending on what people like, really does help. It really does, just helps your mental health. It lets you focus better. And when you live in a beautiful environment with great mountains and beautiful weather, it adds to it.
Definitely, yeah, that nice weather and nice scenery in Southern California.
Yep.
It's hard when you have to look at it inside your home. We do have another question from another ambassador, Arlette.
Hi, my question is actually for City Manager Reddy. So I noticed on the Palm Spring website, you put up the city put up some videos, and you actually gave out your personal phone number. So what has the community been saying at the individual level while communicating with you? If you can speak a little bit about that.
Sure, it's interesting. Actually, I don't get a lot of calls. I mean, I certainly do, but it's not like a flood of calls. So that at least says to me we're getting information out to people in other ways that is beneficial. But I think to the heart of your question, that goes back to the whole e-leadership of electronic leadership for public managers today. How are you communicating? And in a time of COVID, this communication is hugely important to not only to your internal stakeholders, your organization, your business stakeholders, your neighborhood organizations, all of the people that you serve in the community. It just becomes increasingly important. So managers, I can't emphasize enough, communication, how you do it, think about it in everything you do, because that needs to get out there. And in this world of COVID, the traditional ways aren't going to work, even though there's a richness to having the one-on-one meetings. This is now the one-on-one meeting. And so we have to devise ways to make sure that people are included, because remember, there is a digital divide. Not everyone has access to Wi-Fi devices, or maybe they don't know how to use them. So you've got to always think about how you communicate with them. So for example, I'll give you one. The Mayor Kors said, we're getting all this information out about COVID. He says, well, we also need to send a letter, a postcard to every household in the city of Palm Springs to make sure they know what the hotline is and know what some of the rules are. And I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. We need to do that, because you can't just rely on technology.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next, we have Genevieve, who has another question.
Hello again. This question is for the city manager. Earlier, you mentioned cyber cities. Can you expand more on that and its relation to the current COVID-19 situation?
Sure. So the cyber cities, smart cities, M-government, e-government, all these different terms for basically it's the electronic technology, how you're communicating, everything from apps to this kind of Zoom, these meetings. And now we're seeing council meetings, commission meetings online. So that again is where the trend of local government in every area is going. COVID now has exacerbated it. It's making managers think about communicating in ways we didn't have to before. It's making elected officials do the same. And so social media, all these different platforms. But again, as you know, there's a downside potentially too. It's great when you can immediately let everyone in your city know that a certain street is closed or there's something for them to be aware of. But as you also know, the opposite of that is bad information can get out there, wrong information can get out there, and then you have to be able to compensate for that. So again, it comes down to not only how are you communicating, but what are you doing with the data? So one final example, our performance, our programs, to a large extent in cyber cities, smart cities are going to be derived from, well, how many people are actually going to this park and how many people are on that road? So the counters, the data you get from people and how their spending habits, all that has to be aggregated and interpreted in a context of protecting people's privacy. So that's the challenge for e-leadership at every level of government, is balancing all these interests and then being able to make better decisions.
Wonderful. Great question, Jen. And for our final question, we have Camila.
Hi again. Thank you for answering my earlier and previous question. I know you requested more aid for the homelessness population. Is there any particular aid that you'll be requesting similar to that for people who are undergoing chronic conditions in hospitals who don't necessarily are able to have access to it during this time?
So just let me make sure I understand. So just basically help for residents or primarily people who are impacted by COVID?
Primarily for residents who have like chronic conditions. So maybe whether they have cancer or need specific access to hospital care. Are you going to be requesting any type of aid or assistance to this type of population during this time, since it's pretty difficult to have it in the hospital?
Do you want to jump in first? You're on the hospital.
Yeah, sure. So, I think, we have a good relationship with the local hospital here. Actually, it's the only trauma center between here and the border of Arizona. So we have a good relationship with them, and we have not seen that necessarily to be a problem just yet. But what I can tell you is that as we monitor where all the hot spots of problems are, we try to figure out what the best solution is. But that one hasn't been an issue, at least so far.
Yeah, and the other thing in the Coachella Valley, we have a desert healthcare district, which is the way we originally got a hospital built a long time ago, and was only on the West Valley. And we had an election, it got expanded to the entire valley. And so they are the main entity that focuses with the county on funding those kind of services. But we're always advocating, we go to their board frequently to advocate funding for those most in need. And that's been a lot of their focus. We're the city, actually, a lunch that city manager and I were at with a former CEO who said, we have about $2 million left in our budget of their priorities we're not funding. And I'm like, we both were like, homeless. And now they're one of the biggest funders of homeless services. So you just realize if you don't ask, if you don't bring up issues to those entities, they may not even think about it. It's not that they don't want to do it. Once it came up, they just jumped on it, and they've been so helpful. And so that's the kind of stuff you need to really work within governments to make sure you're always communicating and sharing your ideas and asking. If we didn't ask for $10 million from the state, we wouldn't have gotten it. And then other cities are, why aren't we getting it? And I'm like, we went up to Sacramento. We met with our assembly member. We met with the Speaker of the Assembly, and we had one target. We picked our focus for the year, and we worked hard at it. And if you're in office or in local government management, that's the key, is you have to build relationships across the aisle. These are not partisan issues, so many of them, and work together to figure out how you're going to fund the needs of your residents, especially the most vulnerable. And that is something I've learned very much in this job compared to some of my more civil rights advocacy jobs, is the need to build those relationships to get the funding to provide the services that your residents need.
Wonderful. I think that is a great place to end this webinar. I just want to take the time and thank you both again for joining us. We were so excited. You had wonderful answers to our questions, and I just want to thank you for your hard work. I know this is a tough time and you must be so busy, so thank you for taking time out of your day. And please, I hope you and all your loved ones remain healthy and safe during this time, and hopefully everything gets better here on out.
Yes, absolutely. And, Maddie, thank you, and the ambassadors and others for the questions. And if there are other questions or people want to contact us, or on, both our emails, you can share. If anyone wants to talk about wanting to run for office sometime, you can email me and I'll respond from a different email address. But I'm happy to, I do this a lot, and I love seeing this kind of enthusiasm. That's what gives me hope for the future. So thank you all for that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day or evening.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.